Alright, so today I want to talk about something interesting that has been happening recently. Khamzat Chimaev signing with a wrestling promotion outside the UFC. Now, this isn't about Chimaev. We've been seeing a pattern. Fighters like Shah Magomedov, Arman Tsarukyan, and others are starting to compete in organizations outside the UFC as well. So now the question is, what's actually going on here? And honestly, I think a big part of it comes down to money and structure. Because yeah, the UFC pays well, but when you compare it to what fighters could be making overall, it's not always the same. And this is where the whole shift in the business model starts to matter. Back in the day, with pay-per-view, being a star meant everything. If you were a draw, if people tuned in because of you, you made more money. Simple. But now with these big broadcast style deals, it's more like a fixed system. So whether you're Conor McGregor or someone lower on the card, the gap isn't what it used to be. Being a superstar doesn't hit the same financially, and that changed fighter behavior. Because now guys are thinking, why not stay active elsewhere too? More fights, more exposure, more income streams, and it really makes sense. But there's the downside. Activity is good. Overactivity is dangerous. And we've seen this before. Take Merab Dvalishvili for example. Super dominant, insane cardio, one of the most relentless fighters out there. But when you fight too often, your body starts to feel it. Recovery drops, energy drops, performance drops, and when he fought Petr Yan, you could see the difference. It's not just about skill, it's about timing, freshness, and condition. Even at the highest level, there's a limit. 3 fights a year, that's already pushing it. You're not fighting average guys, you're fighting elite killers every time. Now look at Alex Pereira. He stayed active and it worked. But why? Because stylistically, most of his opponents were strikers. Yuri Prochazka, Jamal Hill, Khalil Roundtree, all striking-based matchups. That plays directly into his strengths. But the moment he faced someone like Magomed Ankalaev, different story, different style, different challenge, and that's where things change. So now bring it back to Chimaev. Does this outside competition affect him? Honestly, probably not right now. But it can if it's not managed properly. Because the risk isn't just fighting, it's burnout, injuries, and recovery issues. And here's the bigger point. Who's even a real threat to Chimaev right now? At middleweight, it's hard to find someone who can genuinely compete with him. You've got guys like Sean Strickland, still a tough fight, but stylistically, Chimaev has the edge. Most matchups, he's the favorite. So for him, this is less about proving himself and more about staying active, staying sharp, and making money. But at the same time, he has to be careful because if this starts affecting his UFC performance, this is not worth it. So yeah, this whole trend of UFC fighters competing outside the promotion, it's not random, there is a reason behind it, and I might break that down even deeper in another video. Speaking of the competition of Khamzat Chimaev, right? We all saw some potential in Anthony Hernandez, Fluffy, okay? Anthony Fluffy Hernandez looked good for a while, but then he ran into Sean Strickland, and let's be real, that was a tough loss. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When you look at Khamzat Chimaev, it's honestly hard to see anyone at the middleweight really beating him right now. Even when we start talking about light heavyweight, it still feels like a stretch stylistically. By heavyweight, that's a completely different story. Chimaev is just too small for that division. I mean, most heavyweights are, what, like 6'3", 6'4", sometimes even bigger, and they are cutting down to 265. Meanwhile, Chimaev fights at 185, walks around somewhere around, I don't know, 205-ish, stuff like that. That's a huge difference. You can't realistically go up there against guys that big, that strong, and expect it to play out the same way. So yeah, middleweight, he's a problem for everyone. Light heavyweight, he's a problem for everyone, and he's beating the shit out of them all. But heavyweight, that's just not his lane, really. When it comes to Khamzat Chimaev, everyone always assumes he's the reason he's not fighting that often. Like people say he's inactive by choice, but what if that's not actually true? Because think about it, this is one of the most dangerous fighters in the UFC. Super dominant, super entertaining, and yet he's fighting like once a year. That doesn't fully add up. And now we see him sign with another organization for wrestling. That changed things because if he was the one choosing to stay inactive, why would he go out of his way to compete somewhere else? It doesn't make sense. So now you start to look at it differently. Maybe it's not Chimaev, maybe it's the UFC. And this is where the bigger picture comes in. The whole shift away from pay-per-view into more of a fixed subscription style model, that changed everything. Because before, activity plus popularity equaled more money. Now, it's a lot more control. So from a business perspective, it might actually benefit the UFC to not have fighters competing too often. And if that's the case, then Chimaev going outside the UFC suddenly makes a lot of sense. And here's the interesting part. This isn't just about him. We're starting to see a pattern. Fighters like Arman Tsarukyan and others, as I said, are also competing outside the UFC, so it's not random anymore. And now it looks like a trend. And honestly, it could be a smart move for Chimaev if he fights, let's say, once in the UFC a year, once a year in the UFC, and then stays active in wrestling competitions throughout the year, that could actually improve him. Better conditioning, more consistency, and less ring rust. But of course, it depends on the way he manages the thing, right? Because if he overdoes it, then it becomes a problem. Now, as for competition, let's be real for a second. At middleweight, it's hard to find someone who can truly challenge him. You've got guys like Sean Strickland, but stylistically, that's still a very tough matchup for Strickland. You know, Strickland is just gonna be beat the fucking shit out of him. Chimaev is gonna beat the fuck out of Strickland, and we saw what happened with Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. A lot of people thought he might be a problem, but then he lost, and not just lost, but clearly. So now the question becomes, who's actually left? That's why this situation is so interesting, because Chimaev has the potential to dominate for a long time, but at the same time he's in a division where there aren't many real threats right now. And that's why this move, signing outside the UFC, might be bigger than it looks. Because if more fighters start doing the same thing, then we're looking at a real shift in how fighters build their careers. So yeah, this is probably the biggest story right now. I'm definitely gonna break it down even more in another video, as I said before. But for now, I want to hear what you think. Is Chimaev the one choosing to stay inactive, or is the UFC, controlling what's going on? Drop your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one.